Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're moving away from art to this very realistic world of economics and migration and statistics and aging and all these kind of things. Thank you for being here with us today. I'm Maria Gavouneli. I'm here in my capacity as the inaugural chair of the advisory board for the new OECD Population Center in Crete. This is an effort, a joint effort, by the OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, and the government of Greece. The idea is to discuss issues pertaining to population and then have a joint effort with researchers both in Paris at the OECD and in Athens, in Greece, and then present whatever it is that we're going to produce in terms of research in Crete during an annual conference that would take place in Chania. The work that has been done already is actually a work of preparation. And for all intents and purposes, this is the official debut of the center. So allow me these very few minutes to explain what it is that we would like to do. The law, the Memorandum of Understanding between the Hellenic Republic and the OECD, talks about issues pertaining to intergenerational challenges, economic, social, political causes and consequences, aging population, labor markets, development, clearly, but also questions pertaining to demography, migration, how to reduce migration pressure, how to improve migration management, and certainly address population challenges at the substatal level. In other words, at the regional point where we're close to reality. So with these questions in mind, I have an excellent panel with me today, and I would like to thank all of you for being here. And I would address each one of you with one question, and then we come back very, very shortly for a second round of a common question to you all. So I turn first to Gergana Passy, who has been minister and MP and MEP and just about everything under the sun in her native Bulgaria. And she's currently president of PanEuropa, which means that she's dealing with the social aspects of aging. So I would please ask you to talk to us more about this challenge of reskilling and upskilling and changing whatever it is that we're doing in our productive professional lives. Please.
Thank you, Maria. Because I'm surrounded by experts here, both from European Commission and from OECD, I would keep it more on a personal level, and I would start by saying that you did not introduce me with the only capacity I would insist on introducing me, and that's that I'm a mother of 4 kids. And I think that's a good starting point when we talk about population, aging, birth rates, demography, etc. Because, you know, as I wouldn't say a former politician, because I believe that once you've been in politics, you always remember very sensitive to all the political aspects of the public process around. But once my country joined the EU and NATO, I was asking myself what would be the next big challenge you would confront yourself as a public figure. And if I have to choose one, I would definitely go for the demography. Because the demographic changes that we are experiencing, I think, are of a kind that are unseen in history even. Because think about this, for the last nearly 250 years since the Industrial Revolution, we have witnessed a global outbreak of population, of global wealth, while today we are in a completely different situation with completely different patterns of life, of social behavior. We see that more and more reproductive attitudes are changing. We see that birth rates are going down. we see at the same time that people start to live much longer and much healthier lives. So we live in a paradoxical times when from one side we are complaining that we live in aging society, from the other side we want to live longer and healthier. And this definitely confronts us with real changes. And while this is a natural process, that's what the demographic experts say, I think there are 3 places in the world where this is also an existential challenge, and I'm really happy to see that OECD is opening this population institute center in Crete, because OECD has the access to all these evidence-based policies and solutions we might benefit from. But these 3 places where this is a sort of existential challenge is where we live, so practically from Central and Eastern Europe, the whole Central and Eastern Europe, from Germany to Russia, then the Northern Mediterranean and some countries from East Asia. And this, because you asked me what are the social consequences of this, this is gray economies do not only mean fiscal fiasco, because obviously with aging population, decreasing younger population have to pay for larger aging population, but it also means less innovation. And that's, to me, really a point of concern. But coming back also to your question, because I was confronted with this, and because my country has suffered a lot during COVID crisis, it turned out that we hit one of the largest death toll statistics. And that really came quite as a shock to us. We initiated, as Pan-European team, a report with a team of scientists why we suffered so heavily. And you know, it turned out that demography is not only birth rates and fertility and life expectancy, etc., but it is also how the public health is developing in our countries. And then this team of 5 scientists, they realized that very often it is a behavioral pattern which makes us, although we live longer, we don't live always healthier lives. And that's why, by the way, following an example created by Greece, we established, we suggested to the policymakers a harm reduction policy, which means that we cannot be perfect, of course, but if we eat healthier food, if we hold healthier lives, like more physical activities, etc., because my country turned out to be one of the EU member states where we eat the minimum, the lowest number of fruits per person, and for example, at the same time suffer from one of the heaviest cancer-related or cardio diseases. So harm reduction policies might be a policy that is not abolishing the harmful behavioral patterns, but it's kind of rating them according to their level of harm. And we believe that can help us deal with this problem with the premature mortality that we have. So I would stop here and be ready to jump in on the next round of questions.
Excellent. Well done, Mother of Four. With my one, you have certainly done more than I did. So there you are. But let's keep on that question of how we're dealing with the fact that we're actually living longer and we need to have extra care. So Nathalie Berger from DG Reform, the European Commission, demographic trends would certainly have an impact on our long-term care. How do we address that, and who pays for it?
Thank you very much. Not mother of 4, but mother of twins.
Ah, excellent. Well done. We're doing fine in this panel.
Thank you very much. Well, thinking about our children, we are a very aging continent. and we know, or we have some projections showing that in the aging Europe, we are going to continue losing the population by 57.4 million by 2100. And we are going to see a dependency ratio increasing from 33 to 60% by 2100. This is going to raise a lot of issues, a lot of questions. So if we assume that the demographic change remains unaddressed, this will further exacerbate labor shortages. It will increase pressure on public budgets. There will be consequences, of course, on the green and digital transition, territorial disparities, and this is going to undermine the cohesion, the social cohesion. So this is really for the global picture. Now, coming to the issue of the long-term care and your initiative to establish the Center for Population Dynamics, first of all, I would like to congratulate you. We think in the Commission this is an absolutely excellent initiative to have launched this together with the OECD. And we see that the strategic objectives of your center really align very well with the goals of the Commission and our broader EU agenda for promoting economic growth, social cohesion, inclusive development, etc., etc. In the Commission, we place really a great emphasis on understanding and managing the impact of long-term demographic change. We have highlighted this from the outset as one of the highest priorities of the mandate of President von der Leyen. For the first time ever, our President has established a Vice President in charge of democracy and demography. And 6 months ago, we have adopted a communication on demography, presenting a set of policy tools available to member states for addressing the demographic changes or the demographic challenges. We need for this comprehensive and integrated solutions. We need substantial reforms, we need strong investments, and we need to use a combination of instruments available at European and at national levels in order to maintain the competitive edge of the European economy. So with our toolbox, we propose a range of legal, policy, financial instruments, and of course, our technical support instrument is very important in that consideration. This is an instrument that allows the European Commission to provide tailor-made support, advice, strategic advice to the member states, supporting member states from the stage of the design of the reforms to the conduct, to the implementation of the reforms, the assessment, and even follow-up reforms in all areas of the economy, in all areas that have an impact on demography or are touched by the demographic change, in areas of the long-term care, social cohesion, access to education, information, labor market, social services, etc., etc. And concretely, by strengthening the capacity of the member states to design and implement reforms in that area, we strive to enhance the public services and to foster really economic inclusive growth. We provide support now to the member states to tackle the various challenges related to the aging population, the shrinking of the workforce, and the skills shortages in certain regions. And I can give you a few examples. We're working to support the development and updating of national strategies aimed at addressing the demographic change, like we're doing, for example, in Bulgaria and in Greece. In Greece, we are working with the Ministry of Social Cohesion and Family on proposing a set of actions to facilitate the youth independence. Because you know that I think Greece is the member state in the European Union that scores highest in terms of young people between 20 and 29 staying at home with their parents.
With their mum.
With their mum. But we're working to try and help the youth population to acquire more independence, have easier access to the labor market. In Bulgaria, we support the authorities to evaluate the National Demographic Strategy 2012-2030 with a focus on policy measures in the area of family support and support for older persons, because I understand that the average rate of pensions for the elderly population is quite low still now in Bulgaria. So very important to tackle that aspect of reforms.
Our finance minister was in the next room, and he will tell you that they increased the level of pensions for the last 2 years at least 5 times. So
this is fantastic. This is exactly going in the right direction. And we are very, very pleased to be able to contribute to the efforts that are so much needed in the area of pensions. I mentioned Bulgaria, but everywhere in the European Union, we need to work, of course, on the adequacy of the pensions and on the sustainability of the pensions, and this is another very important topic. Now, you mentioned long-term care, and we are very active in long-term care. We are actually helping member states in their efforts to better integrate social and health care, because the objective is to avoid the current fragmentation and avoid the gaps that we have in the provision of care that can really impact the health and the well-being outcomes. And we try to enhance coordination and cooperation between social services providers and healthcare providers. To give you some examples, in Ireland, we have just finalized a project that will strengthen the capacity of the Department of Health to conduct health and social care workforce planning. And with this project, we try to enable the department to implement policy measures which are targeted at addressing the gap between the projected workforce supply and demand. And in Italy, we are providing support for the establishment of single points of access to care at local level, because the local dimension is so important when we talk about long-term care. And this is where both the health and the social providers will take in charge the non-self-sufficient people who receive treatments at home. And there will be more and more with an aging population. Now, we've been talking about health, long-term care, but we need to keep in the picture another very important aspect, which is the fiscal sustainability angle. We need to ensure fiscal sustainability and adequacy. And the member states must enhance their fiscal sustainability by improving the composition of the public finances and the revenue base of the social protection systems. And this is, of course, to have an optimal tax mix in view of the demographic trends. So cutting low priority and ineffective expenditure can help prioritize and improve the efficiency of the public budgets. And we're working to support several member states. For example, in Slovenia, we have supported the Slovenian Fiscal Council to establish a comprehensive and consistent system of socio-economic and macroeconomic projection models for identifying and addressing the long-term fiscal challenges and risks. And this can really form the basis for similar support in other member states. So we are very happy to mobilize our technical support instrument, to partner with the member states, to mobilize internationally available expertise, for the sake of facing the demographic change. And in that respect, we can support the member states, such as Greece, in really effectively implementing initiatives such as the OECD Center for the Population Dynamics. And we'll be very much looking forward to continuing our efforts in all these dimensions: long-term care, health, social inclusion. We haven't been able to tackle the issue of the upskilling and the reskilling of the population, and of course, the saving for the pensions. Thank you.
Thank you. The reason the OECD is actually working on that, and obviously the reason why the European Commission would be, the European Union as a whole would be very interested in working on that, is really because we are an aging population throughout Europe. At the same time, we do need social services that are getting more and more expensive. So your technical support goes directly to the core of now our national strategies and institutions. Because really, if you want to use one word to describe the situation, is really intrusive. Intrusive, why? Because somebody has to pay for that. And using the example of Greece, for instance, the latest report that has come out on population projection talks about 7 million of Greeks as compared to 10 million today by 2050, which is really quite traumatic as a perspective, especially since we would need more and more care at home. Let me introduce here another perspective, the gender perspective. Who provides care? Caregivers are mostly women, and they are mostly in the black economy because they appear to be not employed. And since they appear to be not employed, the tax question comes into perspective. So who is going to finance all that if you don't get the taxes appropriate to this kind of situation? What we try to do, and I think that is perhaps an introduction to go to the next speaker, is to organize national policies that need to be implemented by the municipalities. The idea being that, of course, the municipalities are much closer to the real needs of the people, and they do know how to address a situation like that. So now, José Enrique Garcilazo from the OECD, I understand that you have been working on substatal strategies and ways to be as intrusive as possible in this kind of situation. Please enlighten us.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm also father of 2 kids. I don't know if that counts more or less than twins, but also contributing to mitigating the problem. No, I'm very glad to be in this panel today representing the OECD and also have the European Commission, because we work very close with the European Commission on a wide number of projects. From the OECD, I come from CFE. It's the Center for Entrepreneurship, Cities and Regions. So we deal with the subnational dimension at regional level, at local level. We also work with SMEs. So it's a rich place, and we've been working on this topic for quite a number of years. So I would like to give to you a sense of how it has been changing, and the narrative has been shifting towards important changes. Of course, on our side, where people live and work is at the center of what we do, with cities, with rural. We have a regional development policy committee with working parties on urban, on rural, and on the indicators. And I would say some years ago, we did a review in Japan, 2016, and that was very eye-opening, because what we saw with Japan was that they were trying to address this problem of demographic change in a more strategic and long-term view. And up until then, I would say that many places that you would go, especially on my side working on rural development, the narrative is that we need to repopulate, we need to bring people back into our localities. So in this sense, it was a kind of a denial of the problem. And I think that the Japan review gave us an indication of how a national government faces it from a very core and strategic level at the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Planning, and develop sort of a holistic approach. So they develop a vision towards, it's called a long-term vision, the Grand Plan Design to 2060, and then they decided to see what sort of demographic projections they would have in 50 to 60 years and what they needed to do to face these projections. And just to give you some insights, these projections, they projected that only about 2.5% of the area in Japan would experience population increase. So you're facing with a situation of very imbalances across the space. After that, we did a number of projects with Korea, and then with the support of the TSI DG reform, we did in Spain, in Resoa. We did a report in Estonia, one in Alentejo, and then we did 2 thematic case studies looking at how much it costs to deliver services, in specific health and education. We did them in cooperation with the Education Directorate in the OECD and Health. And this is very, very important because there's a cost issue. Now, it was mentioned before who's going to pay for these services. And the reality is that if you lose population at the marginal level, it costs more to deliver the services. But at the same time, in many constitutions, you have this provision of equal services, no matter where you live in a territory. So the government has to provide by law, by constitution, I think it's about 8 OECD countries, equal services, but then it faces this cost asymmetry. And this project led to our current project that is also supported by DG Regio, and it's called Shrinking Smartly and Sustainably. And we heard it with this term shrinking before. And it's very interesting because many people think that because you are losing population, you're doomed for failure or for terminal death. And it need not to be the case. So we're trying to develop this project to think about what approaches you can do to do it in a way that you can be sustainable, that can also raise living standards in places that are shrinking. And just to give you some figures, the first thing that we need to realize is that shrinking is a phenomenon. It's something that is happening across the OECD. Just to give you some numbers, about 8 of 38 countries are already shrinking, with some countries like Estonia and Latvia with about 20% over the last 20 years. This share is going to go up by 14 in 2040. And right now, if we think about replacement ratios, the fertility rate on average in the OECD is about 1.59. About a fourth of countries have fertility ratios below the replacement rate. The lowest country is Korea with 0.78. That means that Korea, in the year 2100, is going to lose 80% of its population. 80%, if you do the math. At the same time, life expectancy across the OECD has increased across all countries for the last 50 years. Remarkable progress, more than 10 years. What does that mean? We're going to get aging societies, and you're going to get population decline. So it's unavoidable. It's something that you cannot change. It's something that you need to face. So we need to change the framework from mitigation towards adaptation. And I think that's a very important matter. On our side, what is important is that these trends have a very strong subnational dimension. They're not going to come equally. For example, already about 40% of remote regions are shrinking already. 22% of functional urban areas are shrinking. Cities are also shrinking. And in some regions that are losing population, there's pockets of growth. So you need to look at this subnational lens very, very carefully. And the work that we've been doing is along thinking about different policy areas that it affects that. You're going to have to deliver services. I talked about education, skills, infrastructure, housing, spatial planning. These are all very core areas. So you need to think about how these big sectorial policies need to be adapted to the different territories, taking into account what the current and future population settlements are. And that's not easy to do. It's something that's not easy to do because structural reforms in education, they take 30 to 40 years to see the results. So it's something that we've been working on. So the first thing is aligning the mismatches. So there's places that are going to have less people. You need to adapt that. You need to think about ways how to do that. Financing, we talked about that before. And then changing the mindset is very important. How to think about delivering high levels of well-being despite a situation of declining population. So our first recommendation is taking a long-term view. So we need to develop policies that go beyond the 5-year cycles. And this is what Japan has done. They developed this long-term vision, and it's very difficult to implement it with changing governments. But I think the same needs to be done to address demographic change when you talk about infrastructure investments, delivering schools, taking a long-term view and having sort of like an idea of how your territory is going to be looking at when it comes to settlement patterns. That's the first thing. The second is they need to talk to each other. This policy needs to be holistic. They cannot be isolated where one ministry does one thing and the other one does not. So it's very important to come up with this horizontal coordination at the national, but also vertically, because when the policies come down, they have different priorities. Number 2 is the scale, and the scale is very important, because what happens a lot is that many rural places, they want their own little small school, their own little small hospital, and it's just not feasible. You need to work with building scale at the local level. Governments like Italy, they've been doing this inner area strategy. It's very difficult to do, but I think you need to think about what is the right scale to deliver these services, and we've been working on a project that's called functional rural areas. We're defining functional rural spaces, not just on the urban, but on the rural side too. And this project, again, is supported by the European Commission, so I need to acknowledge that. And then I think other important elements, you need to measure what your population looks like now, what's going to be into the future. And this is something difficult to do because politicians don't like to talk about that. They don't like to see their municipalities lose population and face that problem. I have this intertemporal problem between facing the reality and coming up with more long-term solutions. So that's a little bit the work that we're trying to do with this project, Shrinking Smartly and Sustainably. We're going to do a new project with 10 regions, and I must happily say that we have Thessalia is part of that region. It's again funded by the European Commission. So from our side, we're very happy to be in this panel today. We hope to connect with this new center. We hope even that we can present some of the results at the center, and why not even involve some of your staff members into this project. And at this project that I was mentioning on Shrinking Smartly, it's going to be finishing next year. Next year we have a ministerial meeting in Poland where we'll present the results. We're going to come up with some guidelines across some of these elements and a policy toolkit that can help roll out some of these policies on the ground. So that's just a short summary from my side.
Well, expect an invitation for Crete so that you can actually come up and talk about these regional strategies. Because, of course, you have been talking about schools and services in rural areas. Imagine schools and services in island areas. And then we can talk about economies of scale, because this is something that we have already been addressing in this country. And we come to realize that it's one thing to say that equal services for all, it's another thing to have a tiny island with 2 students that need still to go to school. And you absolutely need to provide schooling for these people. So it's a real question that moves beyond if you like, theories or suggestions or ideas or projects. It's something that needs to be addressed and needs to be addressed now, beyond the electoral circle. Now, you have been referring to Korea. Korea is shrinking, but Korea is working very much with ways to divert or bypass human help through technology. That is certainly one way to do it. The other way to do it, and this is something that we have been talking about it in Europe quite a lot, is actually migration. So in the very few minutes that we do have, I would like you to just give me thoughts, really. If only, I wish we had the solution, but I'm sure that nobody has the solution, unless you can surprise me. But can you comment on the possibilities of using especially lawful means of migration, all these migratory movements that are in fact not linear but rather circular, to help us out in these particular circumstances? And I would start this way, this time around in the opposite way, so I'll start with you.
No problem. Yeah, no, migration is one of the possible solutions. We've been working with some experts on demographic change, and their estimates is that about population decline is due to about 70% of mortality and 30% of migration. So it is part of the problem. And I think there are, of course, many elements that are relevant at the national scale that affect migration. It's obviously a very political topic as well. But when we think about the subnational scale, we face the same problem that, you know,
Absolutely.
we have most of the people that are in the cities and most of the needs to bring people back on the rural is where precisely the migrants do not want to go. So there's this mismatch. So we've been working for some years on the topic of migration with our Directorate for Employment and Labor and Social Affairs on trying to better integrate migrants at the local, and also migrants and refugees. Thinking about, at the end of the day, the decision whether to integrate migrants, it's a local one. It's whether they can fit into the neighborhood, where they can have access to some of the services, whether they get accepted with workers in the community. So there's a lot of community-led and regional dimensions that are very relevant to making it a success or not. And this project, we created a checklist for public action on migrant integration that has a number of elements that can help with migrant integration. So just, since I know we're running short on time without trying to be too long, just to summarize a bit my thoughts, I do think that it's part of the solution, but I think that the local and regional scale can have a lot to say on how successful this topic really is or not. So there's many actions that can be rolled out at the local and regional level that we can share with you some of these more concretely.
And Greek municipalities have lessons learned to share with just about everyone. Nathalie, Berger, there's discussion and voting as we speak in Parliament, in the European Parliament. Do we have a pact? Would it make any difference if we have a pact?
Thank you. Indeed, the vote in the Parliament is going to start in an hour and a half. So on the European Pact on migration and asylum, as much as I agree with you that it's important to act at local and municipal level, I think that in the European Union, if we work together, we're going to go further. And we are going to get through a more efficient management of migration through unified action. And I mean, to ask, I don't want to think about the option for the pact not being voted. So the pact, let's assume, is going to be voted, even if there are lots of discussions for reasons which don't have much to do with actually the fact of managing immigration more efficiently. But already in the context of our demography toolbox, we have been referring to migration as one of the ways to overcome some of the demographic challenges. Because we really believe that attracting and integrating the talent from outside of the European Union is one of the important pillars of the action. Of course, the intra-European mobility can be a solution for example, mitigating labor shortages in one region whilst relieving unemployment in another one. We think that facilitating the recognition of the skills and qualifications, as well as activating the upskilling of third country nationals coming and residing in the European Union, will help, because we will have more skilled workers to access jobs at an adequate level of qualifications. Now, we also think that given the labor shortages that have been even reinforced after the COVID crisis, a well-managed legal migration from non-European countries can really help the employers to fill the vacancies at all skills levels. And we agree, at the lower skills levels is where we really have the most of the labor shortages, and where we have the least of the candidates coming from within the European Union, and potentially the more candidates coming from outside of the European Union. Now, we have done some work to support member states to welcome and integrating people fleeing from Ukraine. And a number of member states have been very, very generous in opening their borders and their job market. We have helped Belgium to increase the coordination capacity between the stakeholders and the displaced migrants and refugees. And we have also helped Spain to address the migrants' skills mismatches in the labor market. So we can do a lot of work there, again, at the level of the European Union and by mobilizing our technical support instrument.
Thank you. But the thing is, unskilled workers that end up coming into societies that might be poor already or deprived already, and that really has an impact on social cohesion. So, in one word, are we going to explode as societies if we import labor? Gergana Passy.
I would say that we're going to implode our society if we don't import labor, because actually I think from everything I heard, and I've always been valuing very much the expertise coming from OECD and the EU, because they have all the statistics inside, but the real battle in the 21st century, I believe, will not be so much for territory. It will be very much for human capital. And from everything I heard today, I would say that the countries or the regions which adapt faster to this new reality would be the ones to prosper. And here as politicians, we are in kind of catch-22, you know, because from one side, we completely well understand that that demography is not playing into the EU's interest. From the other side, because demography has a delayed effect, and because the demographic politics are ones that are done in the interest of our kids. But our kids and our grandkids, especially our unborn grandkids, are not voting. So politicians are really into this trap where they know what is the right decision to take, but they would very much take the populist ones. And I really hope that the voting in the European Parliament would not be a populist one.
Hopefully so, because after all, migrants at the first stages do not vote either. And therefore, there is a question there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you have seen, the subject matter for the new center is really already full. And we do have several cutting-edge issues that we need to work on. Hopefully, we're going to present some of those in Crete in October. And this time next year, we'll come over and let you know what we have come out of that. Thank you so very much, all of you, for being here. And we're exactly in time.